these businesses are run based on a common theme of belief and values. Governance, again.
Can I have one more?
This is
that's it. Thank you.
So governance, again, this is some interesting attribute that we find among family-run businesses. In most cases, they still want to retain control, and this control really is around decision making when it comes to the way businesses basically are going to be run. So you will find a situation where the larger composition of members that will sit on the board will actually be related members or belong to extended family relatives of some sort. So those again will constitute a significant portion of the governance element. The next slide now, I will focus mainly in terms of what is it that you have to do to make yourself then graduate to the next phase. And what I've done here is that I have basically put two buckets of elements that one will have to consider or work on to make sure that basically their businesses then stand a higher chance of growing.
Sorry, Moonga.
Yes.
We cannot
yes,
see your slides. We can only see the first slide. They are not moving.
Okay, just give me a second.
Now we can see them.
Are they moving now?
Just move this slide. Yes, now they are moving.
Okay, sure. So we can probably proceed from on the current slide which you're looking on. Just confirm you are seeing the owner's agenda slide. Sure. So if you're seeing the owner's agenda slide, that's a slide essentially which I want to focus on. And this slide basically has got two main buckets, which are basically the elements that family business owners would want to focus on to enable them basically grow their businesses. So there's issue around how do you manage ownership. At the same time, you have to manage the business, because usually this is some kind of like a trade-off that they do face in terms of how do you ensure that you retain family interest within the business. At the same time, you let the business run like it's just a normal run entity out there. So the first point I want to touch on is basically around purpose and values. What we have seen businesses that have succeeded in this sphere is that they do focus mainly on ensuring that they establish very strong values, which will give them the purpose that will enable them basically grow these businesses to the next level. The issue around governance, I think I did touch on this issue. Most of these businesses, basically what we have seen is that they have employed good corporate governance principles. So basically they do run like their highly regulated business and adopted the good ethics of corporate governance. So in other words, basically they have tried to dilute their directorships to make sure that they bring independent people who give them some insights on how to better manage the businesses. There's issues around wealth. So even in terms of retaining wealth, I think what we have seen is that these businesses essentially have allowed themselves to also invest in other assets, and not just focusing on their businesses that are currently being run on. And continuity, of course, it's a key attribute because there's proper planning in terms of how do they invest in terms of talent, resource from a family perspective, to make sure that they will be able to carry on with the business, with the family members that might come down the years to come. There's an element of managing the business. Capital is a key element. You cannot run these businesses without attracting capital. So the question is, what kind of capital basically do you attract? We do need to take into account one other element here, which is around ownership, that most of these businesses basically will not want to dilute their ownership. So essentially what they will be looking at is when they are accessing capital there, it's what element of funding are they going to look at, which will basically enable them not to dilute that ownership. The way they invest in talent, again, that's another element. Most of these entities would want to make sure that you retain close family members to run these businesses even in key positions. But it's always paramount and important to make sure that you do have the right skill set occupying and driving certain agendas. So in essence, what the point I'm trying to drive at here is you need to make sure that you've got the right team members that are actually working for that family business. If you're going to retain family members as part of your team, you have to make sure that they also possess the right skill set basically to deliver on their agenda. Profitability, again, remains the core to all these family businesses. You cannot run a business that's non-profitable, even in terms of attracting outsiders to put money into your business. They would most likely be inclined to put money in businesses basically that are profitable. Issues around dues and growth. Growth essentially focuses, it can happen organically, or where basically you go and acquire existing businesses. But if you are going to acquire businesses out there, they have to be businesses basically that share the same values and purpose, which I've sort of like covered in my earlier session. Basically, these are businesses which also bring in synergies to the existing business essentially. We live in a dynamic environment at the moment, so if you are to enable yourself to compete with other players who are in the same sector as you, as your businesses, you have to make sure that you also invest in the right tools. So if it means to invest in technology, you have to make sure that actually happens. And we have seen businesses that have succeeded in this sphere. They have invested heavily in tools basically that allow them to analyze and monitor how performance actually happen on an ongoing basis, such that even decisions that are being made at family level, they are also informed decision with tangible business cases. So in a nutshell, those are some of the key elements that you might need to consider. I'll try and run through them again at a high level. Make sure that if you want to run a successful business, you need to have the right team in place. Whether it's family members, make sure that they are appropriately trained. Profitability remains at the core of your business. You have to make sure that you run a profitable business. How do you do that? You have to be alive to the dynamics that basically exist in the subsector or the sector that you operate in. Understand the cost base. You are not just there to give employment or to give handouts to family members. They need to appreciate that you're actually running a business. How can you grow that business? The business can grow organically, where you reinvest the profits that you would have made. At the same time, the other options that exist is basically where you go and acquire other businesses. But if you're going to go that route, you have to make sure that you are alive to the fact that there is a certain purpose you subscribe to, together with values basically you believe in, and that those businesses basically should resonate with those values. We live in a dynamic environment. You have to make sure that your business is well invested, where technology is concerned, because that basically will give you information and input upon which you're going to use your decisions that you're going to make, whether at family level, even at a business level. Ownership, again, you have to make sure that you retain, of course, ownership of the family business, but you have to be flexible enough to accommodate other investors, or indeed other players that might want to bring the capital into your business to a dilution level, basically, which is acceptable, which will also enable you to retain control. Because I think at the end of the day, what most of these businesses do not want to see is where they have actually lost control of ownership, but they would rather want to retain control. Then at the same time, they do have some external capital injection into the business. When you look at the capital that you want to attract, again, here we have to be alive that capital comes in different forms, and what we have seen work for businesses of this nature is essentially basically to go for a hybrid type of capital structure, which of course limits the level of dilution at equity level, but maximizes the actual inflow of this funding into the business. So this is where you get a mix of an equity structure, which will of course will not alter the overall ownership of the business, but at the same time you might look at a hybrid debt instrument that might come in to boost up the funding position. So having touched on that, allow me now to just cover one last element which I wanted to touch base on, and this is primarily in terms of do we have available investors out there that would want to put money in family businesses? The answer is yes and no. So some investors out there, the moment they hear that the business is family run, they become a bit skeptical, and the skepticism really is driven from the fact that there's usually a lot of resistance when it comes to dilution at equity level, because some of these funders would want to have a significant, or rather a controlling stake in businesses, and as such they might want to stay away from such assets. However, we do have some investors actually who are very keen to put money in businesses of this nature, and elements they're going to look at rather is basically the items that I did touch on. They would want to make sure that they see quite a very strong governance structure. They want to see that there is plan for continuity. Basically, continuity, of course, is driven around the fact that the person who has been earmarked to take over the business after the current people who are driving it will share the same purpose and value, that the business basically will continue to live and deliver on its purpose. At the same time, they also want to make sure that the business itself is running at a level which is perceived to be professional, like any other business basically will operate. So we need to be alive to those elements. If you want to grow your business, those are some of the focus areas that you need to pay attention to. And if you were to go that route, you then stand a higher chance basically of attracting people to basically be part of your business, or should I say your enterprise. Having covered that, so basically I have come to the end of my session, and at this stage essentially I will try and answer some questions that have been posted through the chat. So I do have a question here from, it says, in your experience, do family businesses find it emotionally difficult to welcome outside investors? The answer here is yes. Reason being, most of these businesses basically do exist on a shared principle of values, and they would usually think that if they were to attract an outsider person, that person basically we would not be able to blend in into their businesses, and as such, they might find it difficult to actually operate with them. A good classic example of some interactions basically I've had with certain family-run businesses when it came to that. One of the things which they focus on is their ability to quickly make decisions. And this is basically because they believe that every key decision maker within their business is a family member and is holding the business at heart. So they apply a philosophy of where they don't pay attention to too much governance structure, because in these other established enterprises, if you want to make a decision, you have to call, for instance, for a board meeting where you have to put people in a room just to make a decision, for instance, on whether you need to acquire a piece of an asset or not. But in family-run business, you find that those decisions are basically made instantly, and they believe that every family member basically is going to make the right decision at that stage. There is a question here from Sungaweni, basically says, any leads on potential investors. Basically, we do sit on a pool of potential network of investors that have shown interest basically to invest in family-run businesses, and happy probably if you can share your contacts through the event organizers, who can then pass them on to me, and we can connect and see how we can then progress this conversation. If you want to grow your business and attract funding, have the 3 in place: 1, governance structure, business continuity, and business run. So essentially, I think that first 3, which I did show, it is very critical that that you address those attributes if you were to attract in funding. Like what I mentioned, the governance structure is quite key. I think any investor out there would want to make sure that they are putting money and they are not just going to lose it. And one way for them to gain that comfort is a situation where they have got a very strong governance structure in place. Then at the same time, because this is a family-run business, you don't want a situation where when the original owner, for instance, exits the business, then the business dies. There has to be some assurance of continuity, and that also gives comfort to investors as well. And at the same time, you have to make sure that that they are run, they are basically run professionally. So then the other question that I have here is advise how family-owned businesses can attract quality staff, considering the fact that there is usually little capital to pay salaries and wages. One of the elements which I touched on the managing your business, which is basically, if you were to just allow me to go to that slide again, because this is a very interesting slide. It's my second last slide, actually. I can't see it moving on the screen. So yeah, so it's my second last slide, essentially. So that those 2 buckets, one which basically shows the managing the business. So this slide essentially, I mean, this bucket essentially what it means, there is an element of talent. If you were to run a business successfully in a very competitive environment, you need to make sure that you have got the right people to run these businesses. However, profitability again is at the core of these businesses. It's basically an ends to their means. So what essentially that means is that they want to maximize as much as possible on their profit-making ventures. But for that to happen, also you need to make sure that you have got the right team that is available to help you drive that agenda. So if you are a business if you are a family-run business owner, you need to be alive to the fact that top talent is not cheap. It will come at a price. But if it comes at a price, then you most likely be guaranteed and assured that they will give you the right tools that will help you drive the other agenda, which is basically profitability. So it sort of like complement each other. If you attracted the top talent, you basically stand a high chance of maximize your business on the part of profitability. Of course, the issue I think really is around do they want to pay the top dollar when it comes to salaries and wages? Again, I think commonly, especially on the Zambian sphere, what we have seen is that most of these businesses are a bit skeptical in terms of paying a higher salary, especially to somebody who's a non-family member. But I think, like what I mentioned, is that if you want to run these businesses professionally, based on my earlier slide, because that's how the investors are going to be attracted to you, you need to make sure that you have got qualified, competent people occupying the key senior positions within your organization. If you are not that kind of a family business owner, I think this is a call for you to change, because that will then increase your chances of you attracting additional capital into your business. So I think there's a comment here again from Deb Wharton. Perhaps instead of thinking of salaries as a cost, see them as an investment. I think that is a very valid contribution. So it's and this point really is what has helped the businesses that have succeeded to succeed, because they look the salary cost as an investment as opposed to a cost. Because like what I mentioned is that the employee who you're going to onboard, if they are the right people basically to occupy that position, they will basically execute their task and at the same time be able to deliver on your business agendas, and at the same time driving what your family agenda is all about. So I think we need to change our mindset and start looking at it from that angle. Why do family businesses, why do family-run businesses have such a negative perception when some of the largest businesses in the world started from family businesses, E.T. Wharton, Adidas, and Volkswagen as examples? Natasha, that's a very interesting question. Actually, if you were to take a step back, majority of these big businesses we see now that have transitioned and transformed into conglomerates, a number of them basically started as family-run business. What is it that they did differently at the time? I think some of the elements that probably they considered are the items that I touched earlier on, where they allowed themselves to have a proper governance structure, and then at the same time to make sure that they do allow element of dilution to attract a wider scope of investors to come on board, and at the same time also to make sure that they position these businesses so that they run on a professional level. So if I were to probably bring another point here, which might be interesting to the audience, is that when you own a business as a business owner, if you do not work for that business, the only way you're going to extract value out of it is either, one, by selling off a certain portion of it, because there's some capital gain that you could be sitting via the shares that you own in that same business. At the same time, is through the declaration of dividends, which will basically be paid towards you. So if you think that the business has created and earned value, I think the easiest way in which you can basically unlock that value to yourself is to allow that dilution. And this is basically where you allow outside investors to come and buy off a certain stake in your business. So it calls for a perception change that actually when you onboard other investors, it also gives you an opportunity to grow. And in certain instances, you might find actually that those other investors might also come with an additional technical know-how in the sector which you actually operate. So they might not only be giving you financial capital, but they could also be bringing the technical capital element of it as well. In which case, basically, that might even assist the business to transform and at the same time, basically transition and start competing with other businesses that operate in some of these sectors. What we need to be alive to also is the fact that if you're going to run a business in your family, there's a higher chance that there is another competing business that exists out there, which might not even be a family run. So the question is, how do you then compete with that other entity? So there are certain elements that you might need to borrow from professional run businesses into your family business to make sure that you become attractive, and at the same time you basically move it and graduate it to the next level.
Wow,
so
Moonga,
I think
thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. I think you've given us a lot of nuggets. We just need to wrap up quickly because the breakout rooms will be closing out in the next few seconds.
Sure.
If you could just wrap up quickly and give a closing message to the attendees.
No, thank you so much. So I think there's a few key takeaways from this session. One is that there has to be a perception change, in that some investors out there, when they come to you, you don't need to be that negative about their intentions. A number of those actually we will bring not only the financial capital, they might also bring the technical capital. Be open enough to allow dilution, but of course, like what I mentioned earlier on, there are different other forms of capital that might also be able to retain ownership, which you might want to protect for the purpose of keeping the continuity within the family. So essentially, I think in a nutshell, what I want people to take away from this session is that there needs to be change in the way we run these businesses if we were to basically graduate them to the next level. I think at this stage, what I just want is to wish. I hope each one of you enjoyed the session. Please do reach out to us. We will give my contact detail again. So my email address is Moonga, the way it appears on the screen, .hamukale@pwc.com. So if you want to have any clarification, you can just drop me an email, or you can reach out to the Prospero team. I'm sure they'll be able to connect you to me, and we can probably have a much more in-depth conversation, and we might help you probably to work together and graduate your businesses to the next level. Once again, thank you so much.